Robert Kiyosaki, the dude who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, says making money is like a science class that schools don't teach. Instead, schools prep us to be workers and climb the career ladder. If you're from a middle-class family like mine, there's a good chance your parents unknowingly taught you to stay broke. It's not that your parents don't care or want you to fail. They just weren't schooled in the money game themselves. They passed down outdated knowledge because that's all they knew. Kiyosaki likens poverty to genetics. It gets handed down from one generation to the next. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is one of those finance books I wish I'd read when I was a teenager. Seriously, go read the book or check out this video. I'm breaking down all 7 key lessons here. Lesson 1. The rich don't work for money. When Robert was 9, he and his buddy Mike weren't invited to a classmate's beach house because they were the broke kids. Robert went home and asked his dad how to get rich. The only advice he got was, "You need to make more money." Even as a kid, Robert knew that wasn't going to cut it. Robert's dad, whom he calls his poor dad, was a teacher. He earned a decent living but always struggled with money. Seeing how eager Robert and Mike were to learn, poor dad told them to talk to Mike's dad, whom Robert called his rich dad. They were surprised because Rich Dad wasn't really rich yet. Rich Dad never finished 8th grade but ran several successful businesses. Despite his lack of formal education, they went to see him. He asked if they were ready to learn how to make money. They were pumped and nodded eagerly. Rich Dad then offered to teach them, but not in a classroom style. He'd only teach them if they worked for him, insisting they'd learn more by doing than by listening to lectures. Robert wanted to ask a question, but Rich Dad didn't give him the chance. He said if they couldn't decide quickly, they'd never learn to make money. Knowing when to make quick decisions is key. Robert and Mike decided to take the offer. Rich Dad was pleased and said he'd pay them 10 cents an hour for 3 hours of work every Saturday. Even though Robert had a softball game that day, he chose to work and learn instead. He saw it as a chance he didn't want to miss. So Robert and Mike started working for Mrs. Martin, who managed a small supermarket for Mike's dad. Their job was to dust off canned goods and restack them neatly. It was boring work, but they stuck with it to learn about making money. After 3 weeks, Robert was ready to quit. He felt like a slave working for just 10 cents an hour and hadn't seen Mike's dad since their first meeting. So, at lunchtime on the 4th week, he told Mike he was done. School was already boring, and he didn't want to waste his Saturdays doing this job. Mike smiled and said his dad expected this. He told Mike to meet with him when Robert was ready to quit. It made Robert mad, but Mike explained that his dad's teaching style was different from Robert's parents. He used experience instead of lectures. Robert agreed to meet with Mike's dad the following Saturday. Even his real dad, Poor Dad, was mad. He advised Robert to demand a raise to at least 25 cents an hour and to quit if he didn't get it. When Robert arrived at Mike's house, he waited 45 minutes before Rich Dad showed up. Frustrated, Robert accused Rich Dad of not keeping his promise to teach him. Rich Dad asked if teaching meant talking or giving a lecture. Robert nodded. Rich Dad explained that life is the best teacher. Most of the time, life doesn't talk to you. It pushes you around. Some people let life push them around. Others fight back against the wrong things like their job or boss. But a few people use life's push as a chance to learn and grow. Rich Dad said he had over 150 employees, but none of them asked to learn about money. They just wanted jobs and paychecks, missing the point of their work. When Mike told him they wanted to learn about making money, Rich Dad created a program that mirrored real life. He paid them a low wage to teach them life's push. Robert complained about the low pay and Rich Dad's greed. He even threatened to quit if Rich Dad didn't pay or teach more. Rich Dad explained that most people would do just that, quit and look for a better paying job. But that doesn't usually solve their problems. Waiting for a raise, thinking more money would fix everything wasn't the answer. The answer is to make money work for you. Robert was starting to get it. Rich Dad asked if Robert still wanted to learn. When Robert said yes, Rich Dad told him he was stopping his pay at the store. Robert was confused. He came for a raise and now he'd work for free. Rich Dad said if he wanted more money, he needed to use his head and figure it out. Robert and Mike worked for free for 3 weeks. One day, Mike's dad took them out for ice cream and asked if they'd learned anything yet. They said no. Rich Dad told them to hurry and think about the lesson staring them in the face. He asked them to look at Mrs. Martin and the people in the park. Did their lives look exciting? They worked hard for little money, clinging to job security, looking forward to a 3-week vacation each year and maybe a pension after 45 years. Rich Dad offered them a raise to 25 cents an hour if this life excited them. Their hearts raced, but they said no. Rich Dad kept raising his offer, eventually hitting $2 an hour. Robert's brain screamed to take it. He'd be the richest kid around. He imagined a new bike, a baseball glove, and impressing his friends with cash. But despite the temptation, they said no, understanding the bigger lesson. But somehow he managed to keep his mouth shut. Rich Dad was looking at 2 boys, wide-eyed and blank-faced. He was testing them, knowing part of them wanted to take the deal. Rich Dad understood that everyone has a needy side that can be bought, and a strong side that can't be bought. It was just a matter of which side was stronger. So he made one last offer, $5 an hour. Suddenly the boys' faces changed. Their blank looks turned calm. It was like their temptation disappeared instantly. Their needy side was silenced, and the strong side took over. Rich Dad said it was good they didn't have a price. Most people do because their lives are driven by fear and greed. Fear of not having money makes them work hard for a paycheck. But once they have money, greed makes them think about all the stuff they could buy, which makes them want more money. This leads them to spend more and work more. Rich Dad called this the rat race. Mike asked if there was another way, and Rich Dad said there was. But not many people knew about it. Mike was curious, so he asked what it was. Rich Dad said they'd learn it while working for no pay. Mike wanted a hint, and Rich Dad replied that the first step is to tell the truth. When asked what truth, he said it was about how they feel and they must confess it to themselves, not others. Rich Dad doubted that his employees could confess their truth. Instead, they felt the fear of not having money and reacted emotionally, not logically. They didn't confront their fear. Instead, their emotions controlled their minds. They worked for money, hoping it would ease their fear, but it never did. Money ruled their emotions and souls, and they refused to see this truth. Rich Dad urged them to avoid this trap, saying that being rich doesn't solve the problem. When asked why, he introduced the other key emotion, desire. People often want things that are better, prettier, or more exciting. They work for money thinking it will make them happy, but that happiness is short-lived. Many rich people are actually driven by fear, thinking money will make them feel secure. However, they end up fearing losing it all, which makes them more anxious than when they were poor. Emotions often control our thinking, and fear can lead us to make decisions that don't solve the real problem. For example, when someone is afraid of not having enough money, they might think getting a job is the only solution. But in reality, a job is just a temporary fix for a long-term problem. It's important to learn how to think for ourselves and not let our emotions control us. Rich Dad said he saw hope when both boys agreed to work for free, and they also took the first step by resisting their emotions when tempted with more money. They were learning to think despite being emotionally charged. He told them to keep working, and the sooner they forgot about needing a paycheck, the easier their adult lives would be. He encouraged them to keep using their brains, work for free, and soon their minds would show them ways of making money far beyond what he could ever pay them. They would see opportunities that others couldn't. Once they spotted one opportunity, they'd see them for the rest of their lives. The boys followed Rich Dad's advice and soon saw a chance to create a library where kids could pay an admission fee and read as many comic books as they wanted. They hired Mike's younger sister to be the head librarian. She charged each child 10 cents for admission to the library. It was a deal for the kids since a comic book cost 10 cents each and they could read 5 or 6 in 2 hours. Mike and Robert made an average of $950 a week over 3 months. They paid Mike's sister $1 a week and let her read the comics for free. They had to close the library after 3 months because of a fight that broke out, but they had already learned how to make money work for them even when they weren't there. They learned the first lesson. The rich don't work for money. They were ready to learn more, and Mike's dad was ready to teach them. Lesson 2. Why teach financial literacy? When people ask Robert where he started getting rich, he gives them the same answer his rich dad gave him. If you want to be rich, you need to be financially literate. For example, accounting is boring and confusing but essential for financial success. To make it easy, Rich Dad used pictures and simple language to teach it to the two boys. One of the first things Rich Dad explained was the difference between an asset and a liability. He said that if you want to be rich, all you need to do is buy assets. That's all you need to know to get rich. But despite it being so simple, many people don't understand it. When Rich Dad first explained it to Robert and Mike, they thought he was joking because it was so simple. How could adults not understand this? Shouldn't everyone be rich? The problem is most people are taught differently by bankers, financial planners, and others, so they have to unlearn what they think they know. Because of this, they buy liabilities thinking they're assets. Robert uses simple definitions for assets and liabilities. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. This is the cash flow pattern of an asset. The top part of the diagram is an income statement, often called a profit and loss statement. It measures income and expenses, money in and money out. The lower part of the diagram is a balance sheet. It's called that because it balances assets against liabilities. Assets add to your income. They put money in your pocket. For example, if you have a house and rent it out, it's an asset because it puts money in your pocket every month. And this is the cash flow pattern of a liability. A liability takes money out of your pocket. If you want to be rich, avoid liabilities and buy more assets. These simple diagrams make it easy to see how each person handles money. Robert says people in debt often think the answer is to make more money. But more money doesn't always solve their problems. It can make them worse. That's why many people who get a sudden windfall, like winning the lottery or getting an inheritance, burn through it quickly. An increase in cash often leads to more spending. What's missing for many people is financial education. That's why they might succeed in their professions but still struggle with money. They've learned how to make money but not how to manage it. People can be very smart but still financially illiterate. They've learned how to work hard for money but not how to make their money work hard for them. Many people still believe their home is an asset. But Robert teaches that a home is a liability because it takes money out of your pocket through taxes and other expenses. This doesn't mean you can't buy a house. You can, but first buy assets that will generate the cash flow to pay for the house. Robert says if you want to get rich, buy more income-producing assets. Keep your liabilities and expenses low. And how will you know when you have enough wealth? Robert uses this definition. Wealth is the ability to survive a certain number of days forward, or if I stopped working today, how long could I survive? Another way to say it, wealth is the measure of cash flow from the asset column compared with the expense column. When your assets generate enough income to cover your expenses, you are wealthy, even if you're not yet rich. Lesson 3. Mind your own business. A friend of Robert's heard Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, speak at the University of Texas in 1974. Afterward, Ray joined the students for a few beers. He asked them what business he was in. They laughed and said, "The hamburger business, of course." Ray told them he wasn't in the hamburger business but the real estate business. He knew the land and location of each franchise were the most important factors for success. Today, McDonald's is the largest single owner of real estate in the world, owning some of the most valuable intersections and street corners globally. There's a big difference between your profession and your business. Often Robert asks people, "What's your business?" And they respond, "Oh, I'm a banker." Then he asks, "Do you own the bank?" And they usually say, "No, I work there." In that moment, they confuse their job with their business. Their job might be as a banker, but they still need their own business. A lot of people spend their lives working for others, their employer, the government, through taxes, and the bank through mortgages. What Ray Kroc and Rich Dad knew was secret number 3 of the wealthy. Mind your own business. Don't spend your whole life working for someone else. Too many people spend their lives making others rich. Minding your business doesn't mean you have to start a company, though some might. Instead, it means focusing on your asset column, not your income column. Keep your day job, but start buying real assets, not stuff that loses value as soon as you walk out of the store. Keep expenses low, reduce liabilities, and build a solid base of assets. Parents should teach their kids this before they leave home so they understand what a real asset is and avoid a lifestyle of debt. Robert says real assets include First one is businesses that do not require his presence. He owns them, but they are managed or run by other people. If he has to work there, it's not a business, it becomes his job. Number 2, stocks. Number 3, bonds. Number 4, income-generating real estate. 5, royalties from intellectual property such as music and patents. 6, anything else that has value, produces income or appreciates and has a ready market. Acquire assets that you love. Get assets that you love. Robert loves real estate, so he spends most of his time thinking about and shopping for it. If you don't like real estate, don't invest in it. Even when working at Xerox, Robert minded his own business. He kept his day job and slowly built his asset column. The more he understood accounting and cash management, the better he got at analyzing investments and eventually building his own company. He doesn't recommend starting a company unless you really want to. Otherwise, keep your day job and mind your business, making your asset column strong. As cash flow grows, you can enjoy luxuries, but only if the cash flow supports them. Build the asset column and let the income from those assets pay for the luxuries. When assets generate enough income to cover luxuries, that's when you can buy them. Lesson 4. The history of taxes and the power of corporations. Many people see Robin Hood as a hero for taking from the rich and giving to the poor. Rich Dad didn't see him that way. He called Robin Hood a crook. Though people think the rich should pay more taxes to help the poor, in reality, the middle class is heavily taxed, especially the educated upper-income middle class. To understand how this happens, Robert gives a brief history of taxes. In England and America, there were originally no taxes, only occasional temporary levies for things like wars. In 1874, England made income tax a permanent thing. In 1913, America did the same. These countries got taxes accepted by first targeting the rich. However, income tax, meant to punish the rich, ended up hitting those who voted for it, the poor and middle class. Rich Dad explained that he and Poor Dad were opposites. Poor Dad, as a government employee, got rewarded for spending money and hiring people, making his organization bigger. But Rich Dad earned more respect from investors by hiring fewer people and spending less. Poor Dad believed the government should help people. For Robert, working for one of the biggest capitalists in town and going home to a prominent government leader was challenging. It was hard to know which dad to believe. But over time, as Robert studied taxes, he saw an interesting perspective. As the government's hunger for money grew, taxes started hitting the middle class, and from there they trickled down. But the rich saw an opportunity because they don't play by the same rules. Corporations, popular in the days of sailing ships, offered a way around taxes. Understanding corporate structure gave the rich a huge advantage and let them outsmart the intellectuals. A corporation is just a legal document that creates a legal entity. It's not a factory or a group of people, but it offers a lower income tax rate than individuals have. This is why most wealthy people don't pay taxes or pay very little. Attempts to punish the rich rarely work because they find ways to minimize their tax burden. Lesson number 5. The rich invest money. Our mind is the most important asset. If you train it right, you can make millions from a simple idea or deal. If you boost your financial intelligence, you'll start seeing things others miss. In other words, you'll start creating money. For instance, in the early 1990s, Arizona's economy was bad. While most people were scared of the economic crash, Robert and his wife Kim made a lot of money. Robert shares an example of buying a $75,000 house for $20,000. They needed a $2,000 down payment but didn't have it, so they asked a friend for a loan with a $200 fee. The friend agreed, and while the purchase was processing, Robert ran an ad for the same $75,000 house for $60,000 with no down payment needed. Once the house was his, he sold it quickly, creating $40,000 almost out of nothing. Total working time, 5 hours. This simple example shows how ideas can generate lots of money if you improve your financial intelligence and see opportunities others miss. Robert says markets go up and down and investments come and go. The world is always giving you chances of a lifetime. You just need to see them. The more you develop your financial intelligence, which takes time, the more opportunities you'll spot. Many changes are coming, and developing your financial IQ helps you see the future as exciting, not scary. You'll see opportunities and act on them, unlike those who let fear keep them on the sidelines watching others move forward. For example, 300 years ago, land was wealth. Later, factories and production were wealth. Today, information is wealth. But information moves around the world at the speed of light, and this will get faster and more dramatic over time. Lesson 6. Work to learn, don't work for money. Robert was interviewed in Singapore by a journalist who wanted to be a best-selling author like him. She said her novels, which everyone praised, never sold. Robert suggested she take a sales course. That offended her. She had a master's in English literature and didn't see how learning to sell would help. She hated salespeople. Robert pointed out that he was a best-selling author, not a best-writing author. She refused to lower herself to learn sales and left the interview. Talented people around us struggle financially, just like that reporter. A business consultant said they're one skill away from greatness. When it comes to money, most people only know how to work hard. If that reporter took sales courses, then worked at an ad agency, she'd learn sales and could use that knowledge to sell more novels. When Robert's first book came out, If You Want to Be Rich and Happy, Don't Go to School, a publisher suggested changing the title to The Economics of Education. Robert knew that title wouldn't sell. Even though he supports education, he picked a controversial title to get more TV and radio interviews, and it worked. Rich Dad encouraged Robert to learn a bit about everything. That's why Robert and Mike worked so many jobs growing up, to gain diverse experiences. Most people work hard for a secure job, focusing on short-term pay and benefits. They should seek work that teaches them skills they need. Robert recommends a long-term view. Instead of just working for money and security, take a second job to learn a second skill. Many resist this because they're not ready for change. But it's like going to the gym. You might have to push yourself to start, but you'll be glad you did after the workout. Poor Dad wanted Robert to specialize, even though it didn't work well for him. He never got that the more specialized you are, the more trapped you become. Rich Dad encouraged Mike and Robert to learn about many areas of business. According to Robert, the main skills for success are 1. Management of cash flow, 2. Management of systems, and 3. Management of people. The most important specialized skills are sales and marketing. Robert constantly works on these, attending courses or buying educational resources to expand his knowledge. Lesson 7. Overcoming obstacles. The 4 main reasons financially literate people might not have abundant cash flow are 1. Fear, 2. Cynicism, 3. Laziness, and 4. Bad habits. Let's break them down. Overcoming fear. No one likes losing money. The only people who've never lost money investing are those who haven't invested. Everyone fears losing money. The difference is in how you handle fear and loss. The main difference between rich and poor people is how they manage fear. Robert says, I've never met a rich person who hasn't lost money, but they don't let that fear stop them. Most people play not to lose when they need to play to win. That's why many struggle financially. They might have a safe, sensible, and balanced portfolio, but it's not a winning portfolio. They're playing not to lose. For example, a balanced portfolio isn't bad, but it won't help you win big. It's not how successful investors play. You need to be a little unbalanced at first and focus on a few baskets. Overcoming cynicism. Whether it's our self-doubt or others doubting us, we often let doubt keep us from acting. We play it safe and miss opportunities. Robert shares a story about a friend who almost bought an investment property for a great price but backed out when a non-investor neighbor said it was a bad deal. If he had stayed in, he would have doubled his investment and started getting out of the rat race. Overcoming laziness. Often it's easier to avoid our financial problems by staying busy. Robert suggests the cure for laziness is a little greed. It might sound bad, but wanting something better can motivate you to overcome laziness. Instead of saying, I can't afford it, ask yourself, how can I afford it? This change in mindset can push you to find solutions and opportunities. Overcoming bad habits. Our lives are a reflection of our habits more than our education. One of the worst financial habits is spending everything you earn. Rich Dad taught Robert to pay himself first. This means setting aside a portion of your income for investing before paying bills. This habit forces you to find ways to make more money and control spending. The lessons from Rich Dad are more than just about making money. They're about changing how you think about it. It's not about working harder. It's about working smarter and making money work for you. What do you think? Have you tried any of these strategies or have any questions? Drop a comment below and let's get the conversation started. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences.